This is the Real Estate Vibe Show, and I'm your host, Pinky Lumba. Today, I have a very, very special guest with us, Mike Cavagioni. Mike is a good friend. Welcome, Mike. I'm super excited to have you with me today.
Hey, Vinky, I am super excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Awesome. So a little bit about Mike. Mike is a veteran and retired U.S. Navy officer, having served for 20 years. Mike is licensed realtor, associate, financial coach, real estate investor, and a podcast host. Oh my God, so many titles. Near the end of his Navy career, he shifted his focus to financial independence and entrepreneurship. Mike started investing in real estate and working his side hustles to create passive income and become financially independent by age 38. And he just told me that he retired on December 1st of this year. Congratulations. He owns real estate in Hawaii, Virginia, Oregon, and Texas. Mike is the host of Average Joe Finances podcast, which is #1 internationally ranked podcast. Mike's mission is to provide relevant and informative content that will help others in their own financial independence journey. Mike's goal is to help you beat debt, build your wealth, and control your future. Today, we'll discuss creating a podcast and growing your network with Mike. Once again, Mike, I'm super excited to read your bio. I'm like, so impressive. So I'm going to ask you one question. So briefly share your background with us. How did you accomplish so much in such a little time, being in Navy and then realtor and a podcaster? Oh my God, such an amazing journey.
It definitely wasn't easy. It took a lot of hard work and dedication to just stay on top of everything that I was working on. I got to say, though, it wouldn't have happened if I didn't have a great support network, my family, and then also my friends that have helped me along the way and kind of helped guide it and push me along. I've had some great mentors, great coaches that have helped me, especially in the real estate space. But, I will say that podcasting was a lot harder than I expected it to be when I first started out, because I was working full time for the Navy, right? And I was working some serious hours, like 10, 12, sometimes 14-hour days, Monday through Friday. And it was kind of tough. And I would come home, and when I first started the podcast, it's like, okay, I got to edit, this week's episode. And I was editing 6 to 8 hours a week. So I would come home from work and edit for like an hour or two. And then, my wife's like, hey, dinner's ready. And the kids would like to see you sometime today. And I'm like, oh, yes, I have a family. I need to be part of that too. So it was kind of, that was kind of like an eye-opening experience, because after about 6 months of that, I really started to get burned out. And I'm like, I need more family time. I need, to kind of step away from this a little bit. And that's, I started having a lot of conversations with other people on building teams and same way you do in real estate too, right? And it kind of occurred to me that I need to start outsourcing some of this, because this is unsustainable, right? To keep doing it. I'm either going to wind up divorced, or have to quit the whole show and everything. I was leaning towards quit the show because I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. But once I figured out how to properly outsource things and I hired an editing team, even though the podcast wasn't making money at the time, I'm like, you know what? The juice is worth the squeeze, because the amount of time I'm putting into this, I could have spent doing something else, right? Or I could have spent that with my family, more important things. So that was, a great thing once I started doing that about 6 months into it. I also noticed by doing that, a sharp spike in my downloads and listeners, because now I was actually having a slightly better product than what I was doing. And I was a perfectionist too. Like, I was making sure I was taking out all the uhs and the ums, because I'm a big pauser. You'll probably hear it while we talk today. Even though I've been doing this for a while, I still pause whenever I need to. So by doing that, I realized, okay, it doesn't need to be perfect. I listen to some of these other bigger podcasts, and I'm seeing what they're doing. They leave the uhs and the ums and the so and all of that in there. And I'm like, wow, how come they can get away with that, but us little guys can't, right? Because nobody cares, right? Nobody cares if you say or so. It happens. It's natural, right? And when you take that out, sometimes it kind of pulls some of that natural vibe out, right? So sometimes I will take it out. Sometimes I won't. Like, if it's like a big pause, I'll take it out. But I really, now I'm just kind of like, whatever, it's fine. So anyway, that all in all saved me a lot of time once I started outsourcing. And I was able to start exploring different things. And I started exploring how to monetize my podcast. And to do that, I needed to increase my downloads. So I started
Mhm.
focusing on marketing my podcast on social media and really like reaching out to the guests that have come on my show. I mean, the first 40 guests I had on my show, I sent every single one of them a gift, right? It was a really nice Spotify plaque, and you could scan it and it would play that specific episode. It was really cool.
Nice.
And yeah, so it was like, hey, it was like a talking piece, right? I might start doing that again, because a lot of people really like that. But it became like a thing that they could put up on display, and when people, hey, what's that? Oh, that's when I was on this podcast. Yeah, scan it, listen, pretty cool. So that I thought was pretty neat. And but the big part about that was the connection that I started having with my guests, right? It wasn't so much oh, thank you for the gift or whatever. We kept in touch, right? And that's the important thing. And I realized like this is a great networking tool because the people that I'm meeting and bringing on my show are first of all imparting some fantastic knowledge on both me and my listeners. And at the same time, like I feel like they really added value. What
That's
can I do to add value to them? Right. So we would keep in touch. And as things, would come up, we would trade off ideas. I get deal flow in my inbox from people that I've had on my show. I've actually invested with one of the teams with somebody that was on my show, and it's just been a pretty fun ride with that stuff. And that's when I realized the power that podcasting has, especially in building a strong network. Not just I have a bunch of contacts. It's no, I have a bunch of relationships, right? And I think that's the key thing is separating the two, not just a network, but building a relationship. I can go off on a tangent. I'm from New York. I don't know how to
that's
shut up,
fine.
so I'm going to kind of just stop it there and see if you have
Mhm.
anything you want to ask about that. But yeah, that
Yeah,
that's been the biggest part.
that's awesome. So you started your podcast before you started your real estate journey?
No, no, no. So I started investing in real estate first. What happened was before I moved out here to Hawaii, I was kind of on my own, financial freedom journey and getting out of debt. I was following that whole, Dave Ramsey mindset of, pay off everything and then, don't worry about, anything else until you have all your debt paid off. So that was kind of my focus, right? I was following those baby steps. I did the first three. And after I did the first three and realized, okay, I paid off all my credit card debt, I paid off, my personal loans, everything's paid off, and I saved up $40,000. And I'm like, okay. And we moved out here to Hawaii. And I said, well, I want to buy a house. But according to, the baby steps, I'm not ready to buy a house yet because I need to be able to buy it in cash. Well, guess what? At the time when I moved to Hawaii, the median household price was $770,000. I was like, I've got 40. That's not going to work. So I said, okay, I'm going to use my VA loan and buy a home again. So we bought our home out here in Hawaii. We took the $40,000 and did all the renovations and everything that we wanted to do to make the home our own. And then some. I've dropped probably about 100K into this house already, but it's we made the house our own. And I kind of started a blog talking about like how I paid off all my debt and how I got to the point where I was able to move to Hawaii, afford a home in Hawaii, and then renovate it and do all the things that I wanted to do. And a buddy of mine said, hey, you should talk about this more, not just on your blog, but maybe start a podcast. And at the time, I just started investing in real estate again. And I say again, because the first time I started investing in real estate was in 2007 by accident. And it was a happy but unhappy accident. And I kind of backed away from real estate investing for a while after that because we all know what happened in 2008, 2009. Anyway, my
Right.
first property, I went up short selling for about 90,000 less than I paid for it. So
Mhm.
that was a very painful experience that I try to wipe from my memory. And then as soon as I started again, I closed on this duplex February of 2020. February of 2020. What happened in March? The world effectively ended. So I was like, man, somebody's trying to tell me like real estate's not for me. But I said, you know what? I'm going to persevere and keep going. And I wound up getting involved in multifamily and investing as a limited partner. And I thought, this is great because one, I'm so super busy as it is with the Navy and everything else I'm doing. What a great way for me to keep investing in real estate and be pretty much hands off. right? I mean, the only hands-on stuff I'm doing is when I'm doing my research on the GPs I'm investing with, and then the market that we're going to invest in, and making sure that the slide decks they sent me actually made sense, right? I always tell anybody that's going to invest as an LP, do your research on your GPs and do your research on the market that they're investing in. Don't just take their word for it. Most of the time, you're going to get great information from their slides and it's going to be perfect. And you don't really have to worry about it. But sometimes, there's things that fall under the radar that you might catch and be like, hey, I might want to question this a little bit. But anyway, there I go off on a tangent again. So this is more back to my story of how I got back into real estate. So once I started doing all that, going to meetups, my buddy twisted my arm and said, hey, Mike, writing on the blog is one thing. Why don't you start a podcast? He's like, I'm telling you, it's the next big thing. Podcasting is going to be huge over the next couple of years. True. And he had just started one talking about resiliency and just, making yourself better after bad situations, because he had been through a very rough time in his life. And he started a podcast and he got his up into the top 5%. And I was like, wow, dude, I was like, you are crushing it, man. I was like, you know what? Fine. I'll give it a try. I'll start a podcast. And when I first started, it was kind of really rough because I wanted to rush it. And I was like, let me just get this content out there. As soon as I had an episode ready, I published it. It wasn't, there was no schedule. There was no, oh yeah, I'm going to make sure I release an episode on this day, every week. And that's it. No, it's done. Cool. Release, oh, it's 9:00 at night in Hawaii. So it's 3:00 in the morning on the East Coast. I'm sure everyone's going to want to listen to this when they wake up. Yeah, not the case. So I was getting really no downloads, and I couldn't figure out how to get people to listen to it. I was sharing it and, nobody really cared. Like I said, when I started outsourcing, that's when I realized I had more time to actually focus my social media posts, focus where I'm posting it and talking about it. I started posting it on Reddit as well. And that's when I started to notice the increase in downloads. And so, I guess the long story short is I took something that was what I thought was kind of just my own small thing and turned it into something bigger by allowing other people to help me. Because when I was trying to do everything by myself, it just was not happening. When I started outsourcing, when I hired a VA, that's when I noticed a huge difference. My VA is absolutely amazing. And she runs all my social media and everything. Most of the time, if you see my post on social media, it's most likely not me. Unless it's a personal post coming from me, then you'll know it's me. But most of the time it's not me. So, full disclaimer there, guys. But my VA has been absolutely amazing. And she's helping my social medias grow. She's helping my podcast grow. And that has been one of the reasons why I've been able to catalyst my podcast up to the top 1%. And it was funny because my buddy, whose podcast was a top 5%, I'm a year into it. And I think at the time I was at in the top 2%. And he's like, Mike, dude, how did you do that? And I was like, I don't know. And I had to kind of reverse engineer everything I was doing to figure it out. And I realized it was when I started building a team. And, I was able to focus my attention elsewhere. So that's the importance, I believe, of teams. And that's why I think it's so important to network and get the right people on your team. You're not going to be able to do that if you don't network, right? So I love going to real estate meetups. I love going to conferences. I was at one last night, right? Right out here in Hawaii. They do it every month in Kapolei. It's one of the Future Flipper events. Fantastic group of people there. I host my own every month as well, every second Wednesday of the month out here. And it's those, those meetups where I get to harvest these relationships and find more listeners because oh, you have a podcast or, oh, you're the Average Joe Finances guy. Yeah. Let me give it a listen. I'm like, yeah, here, just scan my QR code. There you go. All my episodes right here. So.
I love that. I do the same thing too. But, in your case, having an inclination for real estate investing while having a successful career in Navy is an admirable combination. I have to say that. It really, really demonstrates your commitment to financial growth and your willingness to take calculated risks. But podcasts, that's like a cherry on top. That's the best way to grow your network. So let's break it down a little bit, the steps. So if somebody's looking to start a podcast, they exactly know what to do. So let's start with first a topic, right? Like you started in real estate and your friend told you start the podcast. A lot of people, they wonder, should I start a podcast? The hesitation, is like, I would say, kind of the fear of public speaking tool a little bit in there. And also, picking the right topic. What should I talk about? Who's going to listen to my podcast? So how did you come about Average Joe Finances?
So, okay, the funny story about how I got the name for Average Joe Finances was, again, I was starting a blog to talk about how I was beating my debt, right? Like how I was overcoming, the standard, I guess the standard American diet or standard American debt, right? Which is, all stands for SAD. And, I started this blog to overcome that. And I was like, I need a name that I think would be kind of catchy with this. And, my middle name's Joseph. So I do have claim to that name. So I started just like looking up domain names, and Average Joe Finance was taken, but I was like, well, I'm talking about a multitude of things, not just beating debt. So it's finances. Let's make it plural. So I checked to see if Average Joe Finances was available, and it was. So I said, okay, cool. I snatched up the domain name, started building my website, and I kind of just geared everything around that. I said, I'm going to turn this into a brand and make this my own. And I did. And I kind of feel bad because the guy that was running the Average Joe Finance blog, well, it's not around anymore. And I feel bad about it. And as a matter of fact, him and I had talked a while back. He offered to sell me his website. Mm-hmm. And at the time I was like, no. And then I realized today, like the price was actually really good. Mm-hmm. And I probably should have picked it up, because now that domain is like being sold for like 18 times what he offered it to me for. I'm just like, I'm not going to bother buying that domain, whatever. It's no big deal. But yeah, so, it was just the name itself I thought was very catchy. And I said, okay, I'm going to turn this into something. And then I got like on Snapchat, I found like those little Bitmoji things that you get. And I created my own like little avatar, and I started like putting that into like my artwork and stuff, and started making posts with like this little Average Joe guy, which was like a mini me, which whatever, it was kind of funny. And, that's kind of how I started everything off. But when it came to the actual podcast, when I first started, again, I was just kind of winging it. And I started looking up all this different information, and I came up with this show plan that I really liked. And, at first I would stick completely to it. And then I kind of, I let it adapt and evolve. But the way I set it up was, I always wanted to make sure at the beginning I had a teaser, right? Then of course the actual intro, which is going to be like the music, and then, hey, you listen to the Average Joe Finances podcast, blah, blah, blah. Then the actual episode intro, where I'm bringing on the guest and we're doing that, and just go through the whole thing. And then the actual episode content, right? So I'd break it down in two halves. We'd have the first half, I would do a sponsor break in the middle, and then the second half. And then at the end, we kind of wrap things up. And this is, I started this a little bit more recently, but maybe 8 months ago, I started doing these final four questions, because I see a lot of podcasts that do this. And, a lot of people really like that. It's like the same questions that you ask everybody that comes on. I call it the final round, and everybody has their own name for it, right? The fire round, or, whatever.
I have one too.
Yeah. So I listened to so many other podcasts, and like everyone else was doing that. I was like, and I'm not. And I'm like, things are going well, but I was like, I think I want to have something where I have that consistency, where I'm asking somebody the same questions that everybody else comes on. So my audience can kind of pick off like the differences in how people think, right? I think that's super important. Then of course, at the end, I do a disclaimer, a call to action, and then the outro. So that was kind of the way I framed my episode structure, and it worked out really well. And I used to have like a list that I would have up on my computer screen with every single question I was going to ask. And what a mistake that was, because if you listen to like my first couple interviews, it was almost robotic, right? Because I'd ask the question, they would give their answer, and I'd be like, great. And, and there was like no discussion. Then I would ask the next question. They would give their answer. Then I would ask the next question. It was almost like an interrogation, right? And I was like, this is not fun. So I was like, I want to make this more interactive and fun. And I want to ask questions that are going to get like thoughts provoked, and just let me start asking the questions like that I genuinely want to know, because like, hey, let's have this discussion and explain it to me like a fifth grader, right? So even if it
Exactly.
is something I do
Mhm.
know, if my audience doesn't know, they're not going to get lost. And
That's
that's kind of how I started gearing my conversations. Now I have a thing of notes that I pull up and I have open while I'm interviewing somebody. And that thing of notes has their bio. It has some questions that I would like to ask if
pointed.
I can get
Mhm.
to them. And then it's got some different topics of discussion, right? And then that's it, and I'll glance over. And if I can start asking some of the questions I have on there, great. I'm asking questions because I reviewed their bio and this is something I want to talk to them about, right? Not just like these generic hey, why did you start your financial freedom journey? Like that used to always be my first question. And it was just so robotic. So I felt like once I started just having some notes to the side, as well as my notebook that I keep down here, and I write notes on every single guest that comes in. And
I have it
it's
too.
yeah, it's been super helpful because like if
It
somebody
does
says
help.
something that I want to go back to, boom,
Mhm.
it's right there. I've got it written down. Like, hey, yeah, we were just talking about blah blah blah. Hey,
Mhm.
let's elaborate a little bit more on that,
Mhm.
because I don't like to interrupt people while they talk. Because sometimes I will if I have to interject, and it's something that I want to jump in on right away. Most of the time, I'll let them finish what they're going to say, but I'm writing these notes down so I can come back to something they said, earlier in that conversation. So that kind of structure for me, I like the freedom, and I feel like it creates more of a free flowing interview and conversation, not just like an interrogation. So that's the way I
That's
like to do
true.
it.
Yeah, I like it. So let's move on to the equipment now because we figured out, okay, you're gonna pick the topic that resonates with you, that that kind of tells the story. Like you felt like, okay, my name is in there, Joe's Finances. I wanted to pick that name, so I'm just kind of telling my story. I'm relating to people that way. So it's like your branding. So how you have to keep that in mind. Whatever I was using the word topic earlier, the title that you're going to pick for your podcast, you label it in a way because that's going to be your ongoing branding forever. So pick the right one. I think you might get a change to later on in the middle if it flies. But anyway, so let's come on to the equipment. How did you decide on the equipment that what kind of equipment you need? Did you upgrade yourself through the course of your podcasting, or it's like one time only, but the best equipment? How do you pick the right one?
Yeah. So the equipment has been a bit and piece type thing as I realize I need certain specific items, right? So when
Mhm.
I first started off, I had a Blue Yeti mic, just a basic plug into the computer, and I had my laptop, my webcam, and my microphone, and that was it, right? And then I realized, okay, this mic kind of picks up everything. I need something a little bit more, professional. As I started going in, and once the podcast started making money, it was more of a justification for me to kind of splurge a little bit and get some different equipment. So I wound up buying a Rodecaster Pro, which I absolutely love this thing, and then this Shure MV7. Is this the MV7 or the SM? It's whatever. It's the cheaper one, not the $400 one. It's the 250 one, right? I really liked it because one, when I first started using it, I did not have the Rodecaster, and I was able to use the USB function on this to use it as a USB mic. And the quality, I think, was already better than the Blue Yeti as a USB. Once I got the Rodecaster and I was able to hook up the XLR, the quality was 10 times better than anything I had before. And now I've got this panel in front of me, right? I got this Rodecaster panel in front of me with
Mhm.
all my different little buttons, and I can raise the volume on the mic if I need to. If it's coming in too quiet, I can raise the volume of somebody else speaking while it's recording, so I can make sure their audio is coming in good as well. It creates a cleaner recording on the back end that I don't have to worry too much about, my editors having to add a little extra, right? I've got a bunch of different buttons, which I never use, but it's got like, clapping, booing, all that stuff. I thought about doing that, like when I bring a guest on, like hitting the clapping button, like people cheering or
Yeah,
whatever.
I know. Mhm.
And then I was like, that's a little cheesy. Maybe in the future. I don't know. I don't do that. But yeah, so now I have this Rodecaster system. I got the XLR set up. I have a Elgato Stream Deck that I was using for a while. Now it's kind of just like a desk ornament. But I used to like that too because I had different ways to switch my screens while I was talking to somebody, especially if there's a certain topic that we were talking about that I was like pulling up info while we were chatting. I can just switch the screen and pull it up. Um, I've got another my desk actually. So my studio is actually a closet, right? So I'm in my primary bedroom closet, right? And I've got my lights set up, which they're not even on right now because I'm getting a lot of natural light through the windows here. And but I do have a ring light in front of me. I have some other soft lamp lights on the sides. I've always like had to work on my lighting because I can never figure it out. And I've had so many people tell me different strategies on how to get your lighting right. And I still just I can't figure it out. And I that's probably the thing I've spent the most money on is different lights, and I still can't figure it out. So yeah, whatever.
That
Yeah,
actually makes two of us because I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, but
no,
I ran into the similar issue too. I have two set of lights too, one small ring light, one big one, and then I have a ceiling lights. I got this white lights installed in my office. These are the ceiling lights, and it's like kind of floodlights, but still I just feel like it's not 100%. Sometimes it's like not that clear, the kind of visual look that I want.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe you can give me some tips on that.
Actually, you just gave me a tip. I need to switch out the light bulbs in this closet here to white, like fluorescent light bulbs, instead of they're kind of like the yellowish. It's a closet, right? So it's got like kind of dimmer lights. But if I changed it, maybe that might help. I don't know. I have actually. It's like one of those things with 3 lights on it, and I had them all facing away from me because when it was facing me, all you saw was like a glare on my glasses. And these are anti-glare glasses. So it's kind of annoying when they do glare up. But yeah, so like I started doing bits and pieces of things together. I actually have like this funky setup. Like my mic is on this arm right here. I have a light on an arm. I have my laptop on this like thing raised up above my Rodecaster. I have another monitor on an arm going out this way. And then of course, my background pieces, I just started putting like bits and pieces together, especially since I retired from the Navy. My wife's like, you're not going to have an I love me wall in the house anywhere. So I said, well, I could make my little recording space into my own and just start kind of putting the stuff up where I want it. And that's what I started doing. So yeah, you can see I got my coin collection over here. And that's only part of it. Some of it's actually being hidden by the mic.
Yeah, I can
so
see
you can see those there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a work in progress, and I'm pretty happy with my setup the way it is. And this particular space in my house is relatively quiet. I'm not sure if you heard my phone ring a little while ago, but it did. Sorry about that. And I do have like some sound dampening, like the foam as well. And I have it up in different parts of the closet. So like especially like the outside noise, because our windows in Hawaii aren't the greatest. And we're actually going to replace all the windows in this house. That's actually the next big project. But I like to have those up as well because if my neighbors like doing their lawn, which they usually always do it whenever I'm doing some type of recording, they just know, right?
I know.
So, but
I know, I hear you.
yeah. So yeah, it's but it's just been a small work in progress, and you don't have to start with like a whole bunch of stuff. As a matter of fact, I have a whole checklist of different things for people to check out. I actually have a free checklist. It's 20 steps to launch a successful podcast. And I'll share that with you guys later too. But you just put bits and pieces together. The Blue Yeti, I mean, I probably could still be doing my podcast right now in a Blue Yeti. I don't think people really care too much about that. I'm just more of I care about the sound quality. So I just want to make sure it's decent. So
yeah, thank you for saying that. But I have a Blue Yeti too right now when I'm recording.
Yeah,
by the way. And it works.
I mean, it's a great mic. I still have it as a backup in case anything goes wrong, right? I never even got rid of it. I still have it. I love that thing. As a matter of fact, like usually if we have like a family Zoom call and we're setting up like the laptop or something in the kitchen, like we do for Thanksgiving and stuff, we had like a family Zoom call because we're in Hawaii. Everyone else is like on the East Coast in New York and Florida. So we'll set up a Zoom call and then I just set up the Blue Yeti mic and do like the surround mic so it picks up everything. And that way, we don't have to be like right in front of the computer. We could be walking around as we're cooking dinner and stuff, cooking Thanksgiving dinner and everything, and having conversations with our family, and they can hear us because we got that mic right there. So That has been very useful in that aspect as well.
Awesome. That's a great tip, though. I'll keep that in mind for
Yeah.
our next gathering. So let's move
go.
on to record and edit. Earlier, you mentioned that you used to edit yourself all your episodes. So for the newbies, I know we are short on time, so we're going to quickly try to wrap up all the steps here. So now, for the newbies, can they edit? Can you edit your podcast yourself? What kind of apps are out there? I know about one, Audacity. What are the cool apps or simple user-friendly apps out there that people can use to edit their podcasts as a beginner?
Absolutely. So Audacity is great. I've used that as well when I was doing it on my own. I like to do videos as well. So if you're editing videos, DaVinci Resolve is a great video editing software that is free, which is my favorite price. And it is the quality of DaVinci Resolve is up there with like some of the more expensive like software out there, like Adobe. It's really good. So definitely check that out if you're looking at doing your own videos. But Audacity is great for the audio. I also liked Descript to kind of. I like to transcribe all my episodes, so I've used Descript for that. And you can also edit videos in that as well. They actually just came out with a new beta program that is way better than the previous one. And I think you do have to pay for it, but it's not like crazy expensive. But yeah, so those are the three that I probably used the most was Audacity, DaVinci Resolve, and Descript. I used Otter AI as well to get some transcriptions.
Yeah, Otter is good too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, anything like 45 minutes or less is free. And then after that, like, you'd have to pay. But to me, it was it was like one of the cheaper ones too. It was worth paying for if you want to transcribe your episodes. That's for sure. And I will recommend to any new podcaster that you transcribe your episodes and turn them into a blog post because that helps you out with your SEO big time.
Awesome. That's a cool tip. That's a question I was going to ask you. What is the importance or benefit of transcription?
Yeah, that's the importance. The benefit is the SEO that you get, right? Because as you're having a discussion with somebody, the topic you're talking about will be mentioned several times during the interview, right? Exactly. You're going to be discussing, especially like if you're discussing multifamily real estate, right? And someone say, yeah, when I got into multifamily, I did blah, 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 blah. And then, when I got a little deeper into multifamily, now you mentioned multifamily in this episode like 16 times. So guess what? That's 16 hits that Google's getting on this one page, this one blog post. So it really helps increase your SEO score if that's your keyword, right? So those are the things that you want to really pay attention to is as you're having these conversations, what's like the biggest topic you're talking about? That's what you want to change that your keywords to be for that specific episode, and that's going to really increase your SEO, increase your Google rankings, right? So that's the benefits. Some of the things that can be a little bit challenging, or some of the cons to that, is yes, sometimes the transcriptions aren't always the greatest, and you have to go through and maybe edit it line by line. What I used to do in Descript was I would put it on 1.25 to 1.5 speed. I speak very fast, because I'm a New Yorker and I speak very fast. So sometimes putting on 1.5 speed, I could understand myself. So usually 1.25 speed, and I'd kind of try to blast through it. And then if something sounded off, I would go and edit that word, right? So that could be a little time consuming, and I think that's one of the things that used to take me a lot of time when it came to my editing. Now my team does that, so I don't have to worry about that. But some people just leave it. As a matter of fact, Bigger Pockets, a podcast that I love listening to. If you ever go read their transcriptions, you'll find mistakes all the time. And they leave it in there because it's just like, well, we don't have the time to change that. Whatever, it doesn't matter. It still has great SEO benefits. So again, another reason why I was like, I'm not going to worry about this too much anymore, right? So if there's something that gets missed, whatever, right? It's not a big deal. As long as it's not like, some type of like bad language or something. I always say like, hey, if something translated into a word that's not supposed to be, and it's a bad word, take that out. So yeah, you got to be careful. But that's the biggest thing is it helps your searchability on Google.
That's good. So you said create a blog post from the transcription. So do you do it yourself, or did you hire a VA to do it?
Nope.
How does that work? How does that work? Can you shed some light on that too? or about
Yeah, so
listening?
I use WordPress for my website, and there's actually a plugin called Podcast Importer. And
Mhm.
you put your RSS feed into that, and every single time you have a podcast episode come out. Now, I did pay for the pro version because I realized after the fact that it wasn't pulling my transcriptions over. Then when I
Mhm.
paid for the pro version, I think it was like 29 bucks for life. I said, okay, that's worth it to me. It pulled all my transcriptions in. So now every time I post a podcast episode, as soon as that comes out, it takes the show notes and it takes the transcription and it turns it into a blog post. And then it puts the actual podcast as an embedded player at the very top of that blog post. So when you go open it, you can hit play and you can follow along with the transcription if you want. It's just so much. It's nice, right? It's a good feature to have. And I'm starting to see an increase on my website, on particular podcast episodes because now all the transcriptions got pulled over. So when people are searching for certain things, it starts to show up higher in the rankings. So very
Wow.
great tool to use. And you could use the free version. It won't pull your transcriptions over, but the free version was fantastic as well. It pulled over my show notes, put the episode all together, put the podcast artwork in. So there's a lot of like free or cheap tools out there that you can use to just really increase your presence online. So
Right. So the next question related to this is the criteria that you should consider while hosting your podcast. Which platform is the best to host your podcast or create a website if you don't have already one that you can embed your podcast links there?
yeah, that's a tough question because there's so many podcast hosting services out there. I used Anchor for the longest time. Well, not the longest time. I used it for a year because it was my favorite price. It was free. But then I switched over to Buzzsprout because I saw a lot of other like bigger podcasters using Buzzsprout and they really liked it. So I switched over to Buzzsprout about a year into it. And I actually started noticing an increase in my downloads because now my
Mhm.
podcast was getting distributed to other platforms where I wasn't able to really do it with Anchor. Right. And now my podcast is pretty much on every single podcast platform out there that you can listen to a podcast on. You can find my podcast. I'm on Pandora, iHeartRadio, like everywhere. So that was huge. I think was switching over to a host where I was able to have a little bit more freedom with my RSS feed. Now they do something even better where they actually remove your email from your RSS feed, so it kind of protects you from spammers, and you can add it back in when you need to for like a service, and it'll keep it in there for 24 hours. So I really like that they did that. Their customer service has always been top notch for me. Anytime I had an issue or I had a question, how to get onto a certain platform, I'd reach out to them and I would get responses. I mean, within the hour, like with an answer and actionable items that I could take to fix whatever that is. So they've been fantastic. And now they also have a thing where you can let other podcasters advertise on your podcast. Like you can go through and listen to the different ads, and if you like them, you can select them, and then Buzzsprout pays you. So I actually have a Buzzsprout wallet right now. I haven't paid for my monthly Buzzsprout subscription in a couple months because
Wow.
the money that I'm making from the ads from that gets put into my wallet. I can cash it out if I want. I just leave it in there and I let it pay for my monthly subscription. So now I'm on their website for free, which has been absolutely fantastic. I also excuse me, I also do their they have like this magic um audio thing or whatever. So
Yes, I have that
even
too.
yeah, even if
Yeah.
your audio quality, because most of the time, like my audio quality is pretty great, but sometimes my guests might not have a high quality mic or the sound might come in pretty rough. I use their magic whatever it's called, the magic whatever, and it cleans everything up.
Mhm.
Excuse me. Yeah, so I'm fond of Buzzsprout since I've switched over to them. I know other people that use like uh, Burberry is one. I know people that self-host on like their WordPress site. That's possible to do as well. Um, I I'm kind of tech savvy, but not enough to where I feel comfortable hosting my own podcast. I'm afraid I'd accidentally delete everything, and that would be horrible.
I
So
know.
yeah, so I like Buzzsprout. The
That's true.
only the only thing I don't like about Buzzsprout is they don't do demographics, right? So you can't see like men, women. ages, anything like that. You can only see like locations where people are listening from. So I kind of wish that they would add demographics in. I've asked several times, hey, is this going to be a feature in the future? Is this going to be a feature in the future? And every time it's, not at this time. So usually I'll do like a survey, or I'll go pull up like my Spotify stats, which most of my listeners are on Apple too. And that's the hard thing, right? So when I go pull up the Spotify stats, it's not 100% accurate to my demographics if most of my listeners are Apple users. So it it kind of gets hairy. So I kind of just have to like adjust my numbers as I look at Spotify, and then like, do surveys and see how people answer, like, if they're male, female, age, and all that stuff. So that's the only thing. But yeah, I'm fond of Buzzsprout.
I think thank you so much, and I think you already gave us a little bit tips, how to promote your podcast, like creating some relationship with the existing podcasts on Buzzsprout, promoting each other. It's kind of collaborating with other podcasts out there that give you some boost. I know we are out of time, and then we're going over time, but I have a couple more questions for you. If you can briefly answer those for me. And
Sure.
the first one I'm going to ask you is about your podcast, because you're ranked in the top 1%, that's internationally ranked that you have. So one need to understand, how did you get to that level? Because that's going to be key for everybody, all the newbies or the people already have the podcast, how to get to that level. And then you can monetize. And I guess you're monetizing already. That's what you mentioned a couple of times already.
Correct. Yes. So I will say, to keep it brief as well, I kind of talked about it a little bit earlier when I started outsourcing my podcast editing, and started outsourcing a lot of my social media. That's when I started noticing like a huge spike in my downloads. And by doing that, that's when I started climbing up, I made it to the top 10% somehow on my own. And then I got to the top 5, then top 2, then top 1.5. And I was stuck at the top 1.5 for a while. And then I hit the top 1%. And I've been stuck there for over a year now. I've been trying to get into the top, to the top 0.5. I don't know. Like I find that very hard to break into, but it's also, I'll say too, a lot of people that I thought were going to get up into the top 10% when they launched their podcast didn't. And I thought it was weird. And then I realized something was happening, that there's a lot of celebrities coming out now with podcasts. And, for whatever reason, people want to listen to them, right? So they come out with a podcast and it starts like really fluctuating all the numbers and makes things, change. So I've actually noticed my podcast go down. I used to have a listening score on Listen Notes of 46, right? And you need like, I think a 42 to be in the top 1%. And now I'm down to a 43. And this is because of all of these celebrity podcasts that have been coming out. So I'll tell people, like, don't get deterred by that, because that's just a number. Like, honestly, I could care less if I had a thing that said I was a top 1% podcast. I don't care about that. What I care about is that I've got listeners listening that is getting some type of value out of the podcast itself, right? The other thing is just a stupid badge that I could put on my website. It's not a big deal, right? Honestly, I'm happy if I've got one listener that gets impacted by an episode.
Exactly.
When I get that one person that sends me a DM and just says, "Hey, Mike, this helped me out. Like I was able to go do A, B, C, or D because of this episode. Thank you so much." Like that, to me, that means more than a review. Like I can care less about reviews either, right? It's the impact. If you're making an impact on people, that's what matters. So don't focus on those numbers, and don't try to chase that. I would say, chase your audience, right? If you're getting 20 downloads a month and you're kind of like, oh man, I wish I was getting more. I know Mike gets like thousands, right? Don't look at that, because comparison is, one, it's the thief of joy. But two, think about 20 people in a room, right? That's a classroom, right? You're teaching a class. So that's how I started that. When I had that shift in my head, because at first that's what I was looking at. I was like, oh man, I'm getting 20 to 40 downloads a month, which means I got about 12 to 15 people listening per episode. Oh, this sucks. I don't know if I want to do it anymore. And I started thinking about it, like, hey, 12 to 15 people, like that's like having a group of friends together, and I'm explaining something, and if they're getting value out of it, it's going to grow, it's going to spread. And it did. And it took time. Like I've been podcasting 2.5 years now, right? And it took time to get here. But the thing is, like, if you keep putting out quality product, you keep making an impact, people are going to spread the word. And exactly. I think really the best way to grow your podcast is organically grassroots, have people talking about it. That's the way to do it. Go to meetups, share it with people. Don't force it down their throat. Be like, yeah, oh yeah, I do a podcast on that. Why don't you check it out sometime, right? Don't just be like, hey, yeah, go listen, right? But seriously, like be casual about it and just have a good conversation, have a good time, and you're going to see the results.
That's true. So this brings us to our last question, the golden nugget for the day. So I'm going to ask you the golden nugget regarding the podcast. Usually I give the speaker the liberty to pick whatever golden nugget, but today we are talking about podcasts. I'm going to ask you, how do you differentiate your podcast out of million jillion podcasts out there? What could be the differentiation that you can create, whether it's branding, your personality, or whatever tip that you wanted to share with us?
So actually, I'll go with the very first thing you said too, right? Branding. You want to take your podcast and turn it into a brand, right? I've actually separated a little bit from the Average Joe Finances brand, and I started branding my name as well, right? So now I have, Mike Cavagione, right? And MikeCavagione.com and themikecav.com to shorten it, make it easier for people. And what I did there is I put everything that I'm doing all on that one website. So there's links to it, everything else, right? And I found that, having like a one-stop shop has made it easier. Like when I want to share something with people, I'm not just like, oh yeah, well, you got to go to the Average Joe website and then, go find it here. And then if you click on this link, it's going to be there. Look, I've built Average Joe Finances up. People know what that is. I built that brand and I'm kind of just letting it do its own thing now. Now I'm building up my name because I want people to know me more now personally, instead of just, oh, that's the Average Joe Finances guy, right? So I feel like, and I learned a lot of this from like big influencers like Brandon Turner, for example. I had him on my podcast and he was telling me about, branding and how important that is. And, and you hear a lot of people talk about that all the time. So I think branding is huge, right? You want to build up different brands, but you want to build yourself up as a brand as well, right? Because you want people to remember your name, especially when you start getting out there in front of so many people. You want to have your name be a brand, right? You want people to remember you. You want people that are in your network to kind of pick out your name when they're looking at like 20 potential partners. Like, oh, you know what? Yeah, but Mike's the guy that actually keeps in touch with me and follows up with me and things like that. It all goes back to that networking piece, I believe. So true. Building your brand is what's going to help you stand out.
That's true. That's why my group name is Lumba Investment Group. So perfect. People remember me. Yep. This brings us to our rapid fire round. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. You're going to answer in one word or one sentence only, spontaneous.
That's hard for me.
Are you ready? We're going to try. Okay, let's give it a shot. What is one of the best skills that you have learned in your life? And after learning that, how did it change your life?
Communication. And it changed my life because once I learned how to effectively communicate with people, I realized, the responses you get are 10 times better than just, not understanding how to communicate properly. So you want to make sure that you capture people's interest. It's just like on social media, right? You want to have that hook, you want to bring people in, and then you want to retain their attention. So communication is huge.
Awesome. I love that. What is a best book that you have read or recommend to my audience?
Best book? That's really tough. But right now I'm going to go with one that's been fantastic for me, and that's Traction, right? That's one of the books that helped me realize that I can't be a one-man show and that I need to properly, find the right people to put in the right place. That whole EOS system, right, is huge. So if you haven't read Traction, go read Traction.
Yeah, I like that too. I have the soft copy, I think. In one word, what does life mean to you?
Life to me, I guess it goes hand in hand with the word freedom, right? Because you only get this one life. And for me, I don't want to be quote unquote a slave to the man, right? Always having to work until the day I die. I want to have that freedom in my life. And that's why financial literacy and financial independence is so important to me.
So the one word answer is freedom, right? Freedom. It was one word answer.
Sorry, freedom.
Oh, what is your biggest passion?
My biggest passion actually is my kids. I do everything that I do for them. And sorry, it's one word, right? My kids or kids, my
All
kids.
right.
Yes. Won't
And
go
you
off on a
love your
tangent.
kids. That's good.
Absolutely.
So, if you could turn back in time and talk to your younger self, what would that be and why?
I would tell my younger self, take action and don't wait. Because I found myself, like I said, when I mentioned in 2007, when I bought my first property, that I got myself in a situation was very tough because of the real estate crash. And instead of continuing to take action, I stepped away from everything and said, I don't know if this is for me right now. So I would tell my younger self, you know what? Actually, not take action. Don't be scared to take action.
Don't be
That's what I would
scared.
tell my younger self.
Take more risks. Right.
Yes,
That's what the life is all
especially when
about.
you're
Yeah,
especially when you're younger.
that's true. You have to increase your risk appetite. Otherwise, you're not living, right? You're just waiting.
Absolutely,
So if you're waiting, you can keep on waiting all your life and not get anywhere. I love that. So,
100%.
Mike, how can people reach out to you?
So, like I said earlier, I've put everything in one place to make it easy for everybody. So, themikecav.com. All my links are there. You can find Average Joe Finances. You can find my podcast editing service. You could find a mastermind that I host with a buddy of mine. So everything that I do is on that website. My financial coaching, everything. So themikecav.com. And if you go to my podcast editing site specifically for podcasts, I have free resources there as well. So if you go there and then just click on the free resources, there's a couple different things, including my checklist, the 20 steps, 20-step checklist on how to build a successful podcast, all free.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for coming to my podcast.
Binky, this has been a blast. Thank you so much for having me.